How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for November 8th through November 14th. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here. We have a lot to talk about this week. And, it's funny because not too many planetary transits are happening. It's really just the one big thing that, of course, like we don't want to talk about. But the Mercury Mars conjunction square Saturn, that's really the only major thing that's happening this week. But, I just really think this is going to set the tone for at least the next 6 months. This is a huge, huge transit. I've talked a lot about this week in the past couple of months about being really intense. I've said that this is like the worst week of the year. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of people, that this is going to be the worst week of the year. However, I also think that there's a different side of people that really need this week. Because in the spiritual community, we're all so love and light all of the time. And, I think looking at negative transits or very hard transits and actually getting really real with what that's actually going to mean or manifest as is kind of difficult. And so I think though that how intense these transits are, I think is going to be kind of really empowering for a lot of people that might not necessarily be very familiar with, utilizing their anger or really confronting things. So, anyway, let's start actually diving into the week. We start this week off on November 8th with the moon applying to a sextile with Mars and trining Uranus. And I kind of put the moon void with a question mark because the moon's only going to be making outer planet transits throughout the rest of Capricorn. So, in some definitions that could be considered void. And I'm bringing that up because something to emphasize on again is this whole week, it's really only the Mercury Mars conjunction square Saturn. That's really the only major week. And so I just think the moon not making too many big transits before it goes into Aquarius is kind of a big deal. It's going to feel like nothing's going on for a second. And that's how we kind of start Monday. Oh, whoops, wrong camera. That's funny. Anyway, as we start Monday, again, the moon's going to be, it ingressed into Capricorn on Sunday. It made that conjunction to Venus. That was nice. But as it goes through Capricorn, it's going to make that sextile to Mars where, with all of this Capricorn energy that's now kind of starting to come into place and that will continue to manifest throughout the next couple of months. We have to remember what Capricorn's all about: systems, regulations, rules, discipline. And I think as the moon's going in Capricorn, making that sextile to Mars in Scorpio, there's this sense of, things just, something to say real quick. We have the Venus and the moon in Capricorn, right? Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. Those are both. So we have 4 planets in a Saturn ruled sign, and then everything else is in Scorpio. That's really serious energy. And that's something that I also really want to bring up this week is this is a really serious time. And I think this is a time to take things seriously. You know what I mean? It's really easy to kind of pass stuff off. I think with that being said, though, it's going to be important to know when maybe you are taking things when you are taking things seriously, when you can kind of step out of that energy. Cause I don't want, all you guys just being up in your heads all week, all, intense and, flustered and everything like that. There's going to be times where you need to realize where you got to step back. But, this is a lot of serious energy. It's all Saturn and Mars stuff, right? And so as the moon's in Capricorn making that sextile to Mars in Scorpio, there's that sense of the moon in Capricorn, right? Is kind of detaching from emotions, kind of putting a shell around the emotions. There's this sense of, the moon's in detriment in Capricorn, right? The moon doesn't necessarily have the resources or the time or the tools that it needs to do what it wants to. And so the moon has to do its job, which is to reflect, which is to feel. And it's doing it with Saturn's, it's in Saturn's house. What do you think that's like? It's I feel like moon in Capricorn is very first moments in prison where it's imagine going to prison where you're kind of oh shit, life sucks. And there's probably the sense of real deep, emotion, but this also sense of not being able to embrace it. Cause again, you're kind of in this place where that's not necessarily allowed, or that's kind of hard to embrace. You know what I mean? But as the moon sextiling Mars, there's this sense of really wanting to accomplish something, really wanting to pursue something, right? Mars is in Scorpio. And I think what's important about this whole transit of Mars in Scorpio is Mars is in the superior position of Saturn. I talked a lot about Mars and Libra being so much about hey, Let's just chill out. Let's just calm down. Let's just, it's all about just kind of doing what you got to do versus Mars and Scorpio is like, Mars and Scorpio is going to do what it's going to do. Like there really is no kind of going around it, right? And I think as Mars is in Scorpio and the moon's in Capricorn, there's this sense of kind of like having to detach emotionally out of a situation in order to see things kind of clearly. I think with the moon in Capricorn, its ability to again like detach from the situation because so many times when your emotions are involved in the situation, it becomes so much more difficult to navigate and manage, right? And I think as the moon's in Capricorn, sextiling Mars in Scorpio, there's a sense of being able to, Mars and Scorpio stuff, which is very like pursue things, attack things, go for things, but having that sense of like almost cold heartedness that will allow you the ability to kind of cover something, to kind of, look at something a little bit better. And I think as the moon makes that sextile to Mars early in the morning, and then it's pretty much just going to be trining Uranus all day. I mean, like, what is that? Like, that's not really that big of a deal, in my opinion. Maybe because Mars is coming up and Mercury is coming up to an opposition with Uranus. But the moon trining Uranus is just going to be maybe you find an inventive way to do things. Maybe, the moon in Capricorn, really applying yourself, really applying things, really kind of like taking things seriously. Maybe you find an inventive way to do that. But essentially, I just think the moon's really going to be void and not doing much here. So there's this kind of like soberish, like seriousness to Monday. So that brings us to Tuesday. And on Tuesday, the moon's going to be conjoining Pluto and then actually go void for a couple hours before it then ingresses into Aquarius. And also on Tuesday, that's exactly when the Mercury Mars conjunction begins. Now, Mercury and Mars will start to conjoin at 6 degrees Scorpio, but Mars will ingress to 7 degrees Scorpio, and Mercury will kind of chase Mars for just a second. So it's a transit that lasts a little while. But anyways, go ahead and look at the chart. As we get to Tuesday, again, that moon's going to be conjoining Pluto. And this is something that I'm going to keep talking about a lot because guess what? Now that my year ahead horoscopes are out, which if you should check out the year ahead horoscopes. I've got year ahead horoscopes for every zodiac sign. If you didn't see me post those last week, I'm telling you now, make sure you guys check those out. But as you guys probably saw, Venus stations retrograde on Pluto, Mercury stations direct on Pluto, and there's a Mars-Venus conjunction on Pluto. So we're going to have so many conjunctions to Pluto coming up for the next couple of months. And this is just going to be a repetitive theme. And so I'm going to keep for one, I'm going to keep talking and talking and talking about it. But, Pluto is at the very, very minimum going to rule things like power and fear. Maybe even paranoia is a good way to put it. And I think as the moon's conjoining Pluto on Tuesday, there is going to be this sense of, fear, the sense of kind of like, well, what's fun about power too is there's things where, well, fear and power is a really complex situation. Like, have you ever been so afraid of something that like the thought of surpassing it or defeating it doesn't even come up in your head? Like, but let's say you face a fear and you do something about that fear. The level of, well, it's kind of like, I'm sure so many of you can relate to this in so many different ways, but, when you kind of face a fear, when you kind of really face something that like you're truly terrified of, and you kind of realize, that it's maybe it's not as big as you thought it was, and you can really face that and conquer it, the level of power, that personal power that really comes alive when you really attack that fear, when you really kind of face it, right? And it really takes like a sense of empowerment. It really takes a sense of strength to face those fears. Pluto, that's Pluto. Like, as the moon conjoins Pluto on Tuesday, there's going to be this repetitive theme of things going on Pluto. Are you going to face the fear? Because if you do, it's going to be really empowering, but it's not easy. It's definitely not simple at all. And it's also very surreal. It's very visceral. It's very intense. But I think on Tuesdays, the moon's conjoining Pluto. Again, this is just a lunar transit, right? It's just kind of an in the moment thing. And the thing is, the moon's on top of Pluto. There is going to be this really big sense of like, hey, this is scary. This is intense, but fuck it. We're going to fuck it. We're going to do it. I mean, Mars is in Scorpio. We're going to fucking do it. Like, there ain't no going back. You know what I mean? That's what I love about Mars in Scorpio, because it's like, hey, whether this is a good choice or not, we're going to do it. And I just think as the moon's conjoining Pluto, you really got to make sure, well, it's just about checking in, right? Are you navigating your life out of fear, or are you navigating your life out of, like, you know, what you want? And I think the moon conjoining Pluto might be that time where you kind of click of like, hey, this is where, you know, I got to put things. This is where I feel about things. And as we go into the rest of Tuesday, because the moon conjoins Pluto early in Tuesday morning, and then we'll pretty much be void, where again, there's this kind of like eerie silence before we get to Wednesday. But also on Tuesday, notice that, like, if we actually go a couple hours here, let me move this real quick. On Tuesday, you notice that Mercury and Mars will both be at 6 degrees Scorpio. So what's important about this is things really start up here. The conjunction isn't exact, and I think that's really important because this conjunction, the Mercury-Mars conjunction that square Saturn, also happens when the moon is exactly on top of Saturn squaring Mercury-Mars. So there's like so many things, so many dominoes just all fall at one instance that, like, no, this isn't exactly it, but you will see the kind of, I mean, you're going to see the themes building up anyway. But you got to think of like Mercury and Mars. Like, what is Mercury doing, right? Mercury is going to be our thought, our intellect, our communication, our speech. It's in Scorpio. We're going to bring up the elephant in the room. We're going to kind of bring up old shit. We're going to kind of, you know, bring up the, you know, thing that is emotionally intensified. And it's on top of Mars. Like, we're going to confront it. We're going to express maybe anger, rage, a certain feeling about something, you know, a level of depth, a level of passion too. And Mercury conjoining Mars is super hyper focused for my Gen Zs out there, maybe even some of my millennials. Something I've really been thinking about this. I think a lot of the Iron Giant, and if you ever watched the Iron Giant, one of my favorite childhood movies, this is kind of like that moment where like his like dent, the Iron Giant's like dent pops up and he like turns like laser eyes and like super focuses. Like, that's Mercury Mars conjunction in Scorpio, where it's like all you see is like that. All you see is, you know, what's enraging you. Now, what's important too about this is Mercury and Mars are still underneath the beams of the sun. So there is this level of feeling things on more of a primal level and not necessarily being able to see things clearly, right? Like, if Mars and Mercury were, you know, separated from the sun and visible, it'd be like, you know, we have this clear rational thoughts. But right here, it's just, I think the feeling is going to be so overwhelming that it'll be hard to ignore. And I think as Mercury's conjoining Mars, there's going to be the sense of like needing to say it, having to say it, and kind of just doing it anyway, for better or for worse. But anyway, let's go into Wednesday. Now, here's the thing on Wednesday. It's so crazy. Look at this. So Mercury is going to conjoin Mars, and they're both going to square Saturn, like literally at the same time. The moon is then going to conjoin Saturn and square Mercury and Mars pretty much at the same time. And then once the moon's done with that, it then squares Uranus. So Wednesday is a shit show. Wednesday is a total shit show. It's a wreck. It's a mess. But that's not to say that's not, and you know, this isn't me trying to spin things always in like a positive sense, but like a big reason why I'm into astrology is for like personal development reasons, right? Like, I truly want to improve my life. And something that I've learned from astrology is that whether you believe it's just symbolic or whether you believe that the planets actually have an influence on our, you know, psychological behavior or personalities or whatever, this stuff kind of tells a little bit of the story of, like, for example, Mercury's going to conjoin Mars and square Saturn while the moon's there. There's so many flags that are like, yes, it's happening today. And so it'd be easy to see this and be like, I'm going to avoid it. I don't want to deal with it. Versus, you know, on the inside, you might feel that way. Like, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to avoid it. I just want to move on. Versus, you know, when you see the symbolism like this, like the stars are saying it's going to happen. There's this confrontation that's kind of happening, that's kind of playing out. And there's this, a level of like, I think what astrology really helps me do is kind of like, confirm, you know, how I'm feeling and what's next with that. Right. And I just think with certain things like this is a really rough transit, right? And for some people, right, this is going to be like a car accident. For some people, this is going to be, though, like saying something that you've never had the balls to say and confronting people and authorities that you've never, had to confront before. This is going to be, it's well, let's kind of just start off one by one. This is 10 o'clock a.m. in the morning, and Mercury has just started to separate from Mars. So it happens really early in the morning. And the moon, pretty much, let's actually go to it. Watch this. This is like literally right at sunrise. The moon will literally be right on top of Saturn. Look at that. Moon's conjoining Saturn, right as Mercury's conjoining Mars. It's all happening at the same time. Wait, we're waking up Wednesday morning with it's happening. I think with Mercury conjoining Mars is, hey, we have to bring this up. We have to say this. This is what we have to do. And it's squaring Saturn. And this is from the superior position. And so, it's so crazy. What you're going to see this, like, I think someone said that there was like a general strike against the vaccine mandates, which this is a very, very like specific transit to that. And I wonder if there'll be more things that happen with the vaccine stuff because it's Mercury conjoining Mars, right? Squaring Saturn. That's going to be something. And I've been talking about that for a while. But what I really want to bring up here is this sense of like Mars square Saturn. Let's think about 2020 for a minute, even though we don't want to. Mars squared Saturn for like 6 months of 2020. And so if you remember how much like Mars was in Aries, right? We wanted to fight, we wanted to pursue, and it was square Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, right? But then Mars retrograded, we lost all that power and that momentum, and then it came back and it was hard. Mars squaring Saturn was a very rough time. And here we are. The last time we had Mars square Saturn was when Mars was in Taurus, where we felt very disempowered. That was back in January of 2021. But now Mars is at the superior position. Mars squaring Saturn is like, hey, I've got to, like, this is kind of confronting authorities. This is confronting a block. This is also, too, going, I don't want to say going nowhere fast, but this is definitely things hitting a standstill, right? Like Mars and Scorpio squaring Saturn and Aquarius is like, well, it was my favorite example of Mars square Saturn was the presidential debate of September of 2020. I think it was September 27th, because that's like right when the Mars Saturn square was. And it was just two old guys just yelling at each other. And it just literally went nowhere. It sucked. And that's like what a lot of this is going to be, right? Like it's just frustrating. It's just hitting a wall no matter what. For some people, again, you're going to maybe realize something. You're going to understand something. You're going to hear about something. And it's going to really throw a fucking wrench in your plans. You're going to feel maybe even defeated. Moon conjoining Saturn and Aquarius is feeling like, stuck or trapped or feeling outside, feeling literally like excluded or alienated. And Mercury conjoining Mars and Scorpio, there's this sense of really communicating like what you're passionate about, what you're fighting for. And, for again, certain people, this is going to be very enraging. And for other people, I think this is going to be kind of the time, because there are a lot of people that live a life that's like, hey, you need to kind of like stand up for yourself and kind of like not be afraid to, do what you're going to do. And I think this is what that really is. This is really going against the grain. My only thing is Mars is in the superior position here. Mars is has the upper hand, for better or for worse, right? Mars and Scorpio is very like, hey, like, well, it's like, if you got a kid and the kid's just going to go crazy every single time you do something, like, all right, well, you're going to have a change of plans. You're going to have to work with this, in a little bit different sense. But I think also as the moon makes that square to Mars and Mercury and then conjoins Saturn, there's this sense of like, again, feeling isolated, feeling rejected, having to see things from a different perspective is going to be really, really important. But the moon conjoining Saturn is very, very serious. And I also think with the moon conjoining moon in Aquarius, right? Aquarius is a dual-bodied sign. And so there's this sense of like, again, what side are you on? Are you on the inside? Are you on the outside? And I think with the moon and Saturn, there's this sense of, I think no matter what, kind of feeling very like uncomfortable in your place, because it's, the moon and Saturn. The moon's rules, emotions, and Saturn's in Aquarius, where it's like kind of like, really serious, and it's not really that fun, or like the moon's not going to have that much fun there. And plus Mars and Mercury are scoring it. I just don't really look at this as like really, really any fun. Really no matter what. But again, I think the two big lessons to get out of this is, really be clear about, like, don't avoid this. Like, really be clear about what's frustrating, or something does make you mad or frustrate you, like get it out. Don't hold that in because it's going to show up somewhere even worse in your life. Get it out, say how you feel, but also too give yourself a space for this. Like Mercury and Mars conjoining, this is not an excuse to go pop off on people, right? Like this is like what this is like you're going to be pretty mad, you're going to be, frustrated, you're going to have some shit, and just like have a space for it. And if something happens too, allow it to happen. Don't like, the whole point of doing this is just to make our lives somewhat easier, right? And I think when you see transits like this, it's like, shit happens no matter what. That's fucking life. And I'm so sick of people going to astrology being like, oh, is my life going to magically turn around and everything's going to get great? It's like, no. Has it ever done that for anybody ever? No. Life sucks most of the time. And life's really about survival, even in the 21st century. And I really think a lot of this stuff is like, there are rough days, and this is why we use astrology, because we know that this is going to be a rough day. And so what tools do you have? Do you have people that you can talk to? Do you, this is going to be a great day to get offline. This is going to be a great day to not read the news. This is going to be a great day to mind your business. This is a great day to make sure you're wearing your seatbelt and to maybe, I don't know, double look both ways before you cross the road. Shit like that. You know what I mean? But then after the moon conjoins Saturn, this is the funniest part about Wednesday. When I was writing this horoscope, I was kind of going hour by hour. And then on Wednesday, like Mercury and Mars, the Saturn square doesn't really actually happen until 3 p.m., which is kind of funny. But then the moon, after it conjoins Saturn, makes the square with Uranus. So like there's this literal like unstable upheaval of things that happen later on Wednesday afternoon. So like I think a lot of Wednesday morning is waking up going like, huh. And then like the rest of the day is kind of like hitting a brick wall, going nowhere fast. And I think the moon squaring Uranus is, I wouldn't be surprised if that, shakes things up a little bit more than expected. You know what I mean? Like how much push and pull can something, like if you're playing tug of war and you're ripping both sides and both sides are like ripping at that, how much can that rope handle? You know what I mean? But anyway, so that's Wednesday. And like, look, it's going to be bad for some people. It's going to be great for some people. Again, some people need to stand up to people. Some people also kind of need a reality check. That's the Mars square Saturn. And also, and here's the other thing too, that I will say, sometimes bad things just happen. No rhyme or reason. There's no justice. There's no nothing. Maybe one day if you're lucky, wrongs that have happened to you will be right. But you can't really count on that. You can't even count, like people are like, oh, what about karma and stuff like don't worry about the karma. Don't worry about the karma and other people's stuff. Just, sometimes bad shit happens, and it's really about like, how are you going to handle that? Right? Like you can't avoid negative things. You can't avoid the things that you don't want to, confront, or the things that you are afraid of, like, hitting. Like it's just one of those things. Anyway, just Wednesday is going to be a little intense. It'll be constructive, I think, for the most part, but it's something that I think we've all seen coming for a while. Anyway, and it's super funny about Wednesday, because again, I can't emphasize enough, like Mercury conjoining Mars is one transit, Mercury square Saturn, Mars square Saturn, moon squaring Mercury, moon squaring Mars, moon conjoining Saturn, moon squaring Uranus. It's like 7 pretty, the moon transits may not be that big, but all of the major transits this week happen on Wednesday. And then we go into Thursday, and it's like, again, not a lot's going on. And so again, I think everything really boils on Wednesday. I mean, really boils. And then it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like a fight. Like, have you ever seen like a high school fight? It's like, it's all really intense for a second, then everyone walks away, and it's like, okay, what just happened? That's kind of Thursday, because as we go into Thursday, the moon is simply just going to be conjoining Jupiter. And I like this because I think we need that moon Aquarius conjoining Jupiter. Is like, I talked about this a couple weeks ago, where I was talking about like, when I was like angry or upset, like I would literally just like run away for a minute to like get my, head straight with stuff. And that's a lot of like this. That's a lot of this. Like moon conjoining Jupiter and Aquarius is like, this is a great transit to reflect on things, reflect on how you feel, reflect on what matters to you. That's that Saturn stuff, right? Like Saturn is, maturity. Saturn is rules. Saturn is regulations. And I think Jupiter there is very like idealistic. Jupiter's very hopeful, and I also think Jupiter is very trying to look at the bigger picture, right? Trying to look at, the big scope of things. And I think as the moon conjoins Jupiter, I think there's a lot of reflection on what Wednesday was. And there's a lot of like, where do I sit with things? Well, it's kind of like, have you ever been like really angry and you got in like a fight and then you like walk away and you're like calm? You're or for example, like, what is it? Like when you cry yourself to sleep and you wake up like the next day, it's like you got like this amazing sleep and like you're not as cranky anymore. Like that's kind of like Thursday, right? That's not to say that the crankiness won't be there, but like I think the moon conjoining Jupiter is definitely like, now that you got it out of your system and you're a little bit calmed down, let's work through it. Let's talk about it. Let's, reflect on it. That's not to say that's going to make anything easy. I just think this is I think Thursday is much more a space to be like, okay, how do I, go about this? How do I manage this? Right. Jupiter is now direct and Jupiter is starting to move forward in Aquarius. So we've been over this stuff. We have to think about what Jupiter in Aquarius was doing. Oh, this was around, I believe, April time when Jupiter, maybe even, no, I would say March when Jupiter was around this part of Aquarius. And, Jupiter went direct over this part of Aquarius, went retrograde, came back, and then station directed is now moving forward again. We've been, deciding what we believe about all this Aquarius stuff, right? Which the Aquarius stuff is the community stuff, the idealized, the what side are you on stuff. And, I think the moon conjoining Jupiter here is again, like really just reflecting on a lot of it, being like, hey, how do I see the bigger picture? And what does this mean kind of moving forward? Because I think this is a really intense, square. But anyway, then after the moon conjoins Jupiter, it's void all day. So I just don't think Thursday has much to offer. I think the moon conjoining Jupiter is like, let's look at the bright side. But then besides that, it's really just kind of, not a lot going on. So that brings us to Friday. I do like Friday. Okay. So Friday actually has a couple of really nice transits. I have a lot of plans Friday. I'm putting out a new video on Friday. My Venus retrograde video is coming out on Friday. So make sure you're ready for that one. Also, if you like this video, give me a like. Let the algorithm know you like this. That would be super helpful. Anyway, Friday, moon's going to go into Pisces. Love that. Sun's going to trine Neptune. I know you're going to be like, Cameron, you're changing your tune on Neptune. Oh, that's kind of funny. That rhymes. It's not that I love Neptune. I still have my problems with it. But like a sun in Scorpio trining Neptune in Pisces, sure, that sounds fun. Moon's going to be sextiling Venus, and then the moon will then trine Mars and Mercury. So I really actually like Friday. Let me get to it. Let's go backwards a little bit here, a couple hours in the earlier part of Friday. So the big thing with Friday is that the moon's going to ingress into Pisces, right? The moon in Pisces is very reflective and touchy-feely, is looking at the big picture, right? It's in Jupiter's house. And I think as the moon's in Pisces, the level of moisture, the level of wetness kind of allows that ability to be like soft. Like, well, for example, we're in Scorpio season, right? Which might be like really intense and energetic and like really rigid. But I think as the moon, like that could really shift, right? At the end of the day, Scorpio is a water sign. And some of the, it's really funny. Scorpios are both, there's two types of Scorpios. They're either like, just like super like, very like dark, mysterious, like intense, or they're like super bubbly and nice. I know a ton of bubbly, nice Scorpios. And it's always the funniest thing to be like, oh, what's your sign? They're like, I'm a Scorpio. And you're like, you're so nice. Scorpio is a water sign. Like, I think that's what's important. I think as the moon goes into Pisces, that can really disengage, I think, a lot of the frustration of like Scorpio, right? Like, it's also funny too, like Scorpio and Pisces relationships are some of the funniest in my opinion. Like, I don't know, it's really funny. But anyway, as the moon goes into Pisces and sextiles Venus and then trines Mars and Mercury, there's this sense of kind of like understanding things, right? Like the moon in Pisces sextiling Venus and Capricorn is like, okay, like I can play by these rules. I can start to see how to apply this in my life. Like Venus and Capricorn, right, is like very like, Venus wants to, again, enjoy things. In Capricorn, Venus wants to be able to like enjoy the rules, enjoy the system, enjoy the way things are going. And I think the moon in Pisces, for one, Pisces is a mutable sign, right? It symbolizes change and adaptation. Jupiter's main significations is integration, right? So I think as the moon's in Pisces, there's the sense of adapting, changing, going with things, right? and it's going to be sextiling Venus and Capricorn, where there's this sense of like, okay, this is something that's working for me. This is a structure or a plan or a routine that I can vibe with. And I think as the moon makes that sextile to Venus, separates from Venus, then shines Mars and Mercury. Mars and Mercury are like, yes, this is clicking. This makes sense. This is something. It's kind of like sometimes a quote I've heard before that I really like. It's like, um, someone going 100 miles an hour the wrong way is really easy to fix because you just got to change the direction that they're going in, because then they'll go 100 miles an hour in the right direction, versus someone who's going 0 miles an hour. It's hard to get them to do anything. And I think the moon in Pisces, after it makes that sextile with Venus and then shines Mars and Mercury, is like getting that 100 miles an hour person from the wrong direction to the right direction. And I like that. I think it involves the moon in Pisces, right? This ability to like see both sides, this ability to integrate, this ability to be very peaceful and loving and sweet. And as it shines Mars and Mercury, there's this sense of like, yes, I feel that way too. I agree with that. I'm very passionate about that. That's something, that you can act on. And so I think Friday is much more of like, there's a replenish, watery vibe. Because again, sure, Venus is in Capricorn, Saturn, Jupiter in Aquarius, and everything's in Scorpio. But again, I think when we get those water transits, like it kind of, again, disengages the very, like the moon in Aquarius and the moon in Capricorn with Scorpio stuff is like very, very serious, versus like the little moon in Pisces transit. Again, it makes things very soft, makes things very intimate, makes things very deep too. That's the other thing with the Scorpio stuff. I think having so many hardcore, like, moon in Capricorn, moon in Aquarius, where it doesn't really allow for depth. Like there's that surface level thing, but then as the moon goes into Pisces, I think it allows for that level of deepness that the Scorpio stuff offers. So I do like Friday. I think Friday is much more calming and it brings much more clarity to things. Which brings us into Saturday. On Saturday, that's when we're going to be having Mercury go opposite Uranus and the moon conjoin Neptune. See, this is where, again, I change my tune on Neptune, where depending on what activities you're doing, Neptune could be good or bad. But the big thing here too is that, I also meant to talk about last week. So I was like, wait a second. The sun's also trining Neptune also on Friday. So there's this sense again of kind of like, I think that the sun in Scorpio, our egos are very attached to like, the pain, the suffering, the trauma. And I think as it's trining Neptune and Pisces, we might kind of, one, be careful of gaslighting yourself, and kind of like something I talk a lot with Neptune is like, Neptune can distort what you're seeing. And so don't make up a story about what you're seeing just because you're seeing it, because you're going to interpret it in one way. And I think the sun in Scorpio, because our ego is really attached to like our anger, our emotions, our frustrations, I think it's going to be easy to really contort something. So just, trust your gut, trust your intuition, and don't read too into things, especially as we go into Saturday. Because I think on Saturday is the moon's conjoining Neptune. This is funny because this is going to look a couple different ways. One, the moon's going to be conjoining Neptune in Pisces, where there's this sense of like, exploring emotions. Something I talk about with Neptune is very like saturation. I think of Neptune sometimes as like a deep fried meme. A lot of filters, a lot of, enhancements on it. It's just very, multi-layered. It's very, enriched. It's very saturated. I think as the moon's in Pisces on top of Neptune, there's a saturation to the emotions. There's this, being able to really feel things in a very dynamic way. And it's trining, again, that Mars, Mercury, Sun. So again, there's this like level of depth with the Scorpio season that I think the Pisces moon transit will allow us to go into. So things will get really deep, I think, on Saturday. And then Mercury is going to go opposite Uranus, though, where, again, be careful how deep you go. You might find something. You might hit something. And that's where I think the Mercury, one thing too is to go back to what I was saying earlier about like making up a story. Because I think the moon in Pisces on top of Neptune is like seeing things one way. And then Mercury opposite Uranus is like, because I see things this way, because I'm understanding it this way, I'm going to pop off. I'm going to become unhinged. I'm going to shake things up a bit. So on Saturday, really, this is kind of one of those things of like, just really check your work. Like, be careful if like Mercury opposite Uranus, if you're going to say it and if you're going to, throw the rug, like, what's that freaking saying? Like rip the carpet or rip the rug from people or whatever, rip the rug under the feet. I don't know. But if you're gonna do that, make sure you know what you're talking about. Because I just think as the moon's on top of Pisces, I mean the moon's on top of Neptune, shining the sun. There's this sense of like you may be seeing things in a certain way because your ego is really attached to a certain outcome or a certain fear or a certain anger or a certain perspective, right? And Mercury's in Scorpio, right? We're really kind of trying to, you know, dig in for like Mercury and Scorpio, so like trying to like dig information out of people, like really trying to like, yeah, yeah, like tell me more. I want to know more. Mercury and Scorpio will go to that depth, but I think as again, just like I said last week, if you don't call before you dig, you might hit something that kind of fucks things up. But here's the thing though. Sometimes there's two ways this is gonna look. One, you're gonna dig deep down and you're gonna hit that power cable or you're gonna hit that gas line. And things are gonna go whoops for a minute, which I think for a lot of people, like it's super funny because this is so much water. I guarantee you, at least one of you is gonna like be like doing some type of housework and like you're gonna have like a flood in your house or something like that. But Mercury going opposite Uranus too, it's like sometimes if, you know, X marks the spot and you kind of dig right somewhere, you might pick up something that you weren't necessarily. Well, it was like, what was that? There's a news story. It's like some girl in somewhere in Europe, like randomly found like a Viking sword in a river. It's like, oh yeah, that's very this, honestly. Like I wouldn't like that's very this transit. Where well, again, with for certain people, this might be a very big breakthrough. Like sometimes it takes getting things that deep. Sometimes it takes going that deep to really get to the truth of the matter, right? And I think as Uranus is in Taurus, that might feel very unstable and that might make us feel very insecure. But like this is that Scorpio Pisces stuff, like that raw deep like emotion and that like getting like we fucking need that. You know what I mean? Like there's like I don't know, this is a very real time, I feel like, you know. This is a very in a lot of people's lives. And it's going to continue to be that way. So I just think it just gets very deep on Saturday. So we bring it so that takes us to Sunday. Moon's going to ingress into Aries, then it will sextile Saturn, it'll square Venus, and then the sun is going to square Jupiter. That's kind of a weird mixed goodie bag of transits, because, well, for one, I think is the sun. Well, the sun really doesn't square Jupiter until like Monday, but I think is the sun squaring Jupiter. Again, our ego in Scorpio squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is like not. It's like there's a sense of literally like not wanting to conform. Like it's super funny. It's just super funny how people interpret things, but Scorpio is so like, I'm going to go like Scorpio is like, I'm going to do this because I'm different because, you know, fuck the system and everything like that. And I think the sun in Scorpio squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is, you know, going against the system, going against, you know, popular demand, but it's very ego, right? There's a sun in Scorpio. Our ego is literally going against the sense of like integrating things together. So, this isn't necessarily like the most peaceful week again, but I think that's important. It's not about keeping the peace sometimes. Like, you know, you got to kind of fight for what the fuck you believe in and what you want. And like, if you're not going to stand up for that, same thing with, you know, just with anything in life, like what's real, what matters to you. And I just think, you know, that's what a lot of this week's going to really call into play. But I think as the moon goes into Aries, now the moon's out of Pisces, the moon's in Mars' sign, right? Where there's a sense of like, okay, this is how I feel. This is what I'm going for. This is what we're going to do. Moon in Aries is very impulsive, very like, this is what I have the energy for, yada, yada, yada. But the moon will then sextile Saturn, which again is really constructive, right? Moon in Aries sextiling Saturn, of course, being able to like put yourself into the right positions with the right people. The moon is going to be squaring Venus though, which is kind of a funny, like moon in Aries squaring Venus in Capricorn is so like I would look at that as like the moon in Aries wants to pursue something a certain way, but Venus and Capricorn's like, you have to play by the rules and you have to do things by a certain system. And I think the moon in Aries is like, okay, you know, how do I do what I want? Not necessarily to break the rules, but to kind of, but like, I think maybe the moon in Aries, it's kind of like, or moon in Aries squaring Venus and Capricorn is like, there's like maybe blurred lines on like what the rules are, what the rules aren't. And I think there might be kind of this level of like, I want this, but like the way that I just went about it didn't work that well. So it's a little weird. It's a little funky, to be honest with you. But I think this the moon sextiling Saturn. It's not necessarily like the worst thing ever. It's just one of those things where, you might go, oh, that was weird. Like Venus and Capricorn is like, doing things by a certain system, and then the moon in Aries kind of like is like, no, we're not going to do that. And it will, again, it's not really a bad transit, but it is kind of like a, maybe you ordered your favorite food and it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to. Again, and the sun's going to be squaring Jupiter. There's the sense of like not wanting to, well, also too, Jupiter in Aquarius, Sun in Scorpio is like, I can't see the hope and I can't see the light because I'm a Scorpio and everything's deep and intense for me. So I think Sunday, Sunday doesn't end, usually I kind of like end things on like a weird note, like as if there's like a lesson to wrap. And like, I don't really think by Sunday there is. I think by Sunday we got more things have yet to develop because, well, what's interesting by Sunday, we go into next week, Mars goes opposite Uranus. That's going to be like, that was super fun last time. Well, it was really funny last time. Last time everything was in Scorpio went opposite Uranus. It was like Trump got COVID, which was like the funniest thing, like at like that time last year out of everything to happen. Mercury's going to try Neptune. Kind of like that. We have the partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. I'm not even ready for the nodes to go into Scorpio and Taurus, but that's starting next week. Venus enters shadow next week. Venus trines Uranus next week. And again, Mars opposite Uranus. I don't know why I wrote that twice, but so much. Next week has so much more too. And like, what's funny is this week isn't even like this week that I just got done talking about. It's not even like a build up to next week. It's like there's this week, which is one thing, and then like next week is almost like something completely different. I think it might take some context of this week, but next week is super crazy. Again, like Mars opposite Uranus, Venus enters shadow. That a partial eclipse that we're going to have in Scorpio and Taurus, even though the nodes are still in Gemini and Sag, but that's going to be changing here in January. But anyway, that's this week for you guys. Like, to be honest with you, like I said, it's not everything's supposed to be good in life. Sometimes shit just happens, but also this is something to like, don't be afraid to resist. Don't be afraid to like push back on things. Don't be afraid to like, also Mars and Scorpio scoring Saturn and Aquarius. Like, this isn't like a day to be like, oh, let's be passive aggressive and work things out. Like sometimes you have to hash things out in order to get it out there. Like, and not a lot of people want to do that, but sometimes that's what's needed. So like people's voices are heard so that you feel, so that there's an understanding, right? And so, this is a really intense week. I think for, some people, this is about standing up for things. And I think for other people, this is going to be about like making sure, like, you kind of check yourself, realizing maybe what's wrong, realizing where you need to stop. Again, Mercury conjoining Mars, squaring Saturn is really going to be like clashing against things, right? And so have a space for that is all I'm trying to say. Like if you're going to get like an argument with someone, have a space where you can, not necessarily rage dump on people or things like that. But anyway, it's going to be kind of a rough week. But life moves on. There'll be better days ahead. Get over it. We're gonna, and then honestly, get over it because I'm going to see you next week and we're going to talk about other things. But with that being said, I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll be seeing you next week.